Kunming Summer Institute in Survey Science and Quantitative Methodology conducted the first ever self-administered survey in DPRK history to measure self-esteem of North Korean people. We used the Rosenberg self-esteem scale for the first time in DPRK research. I would like to underline how challenging it is to conduct such a survey in a country where people should not be asked about private feelings and individual opinion. PSI is a joint teaching program organized by the International Strategy and Reconciliation Foundation in collaboration with several international associations, including the Aapor. PSI is modeled after the 65-year-old University of Michigan Summer Institute to instruct graduate students and professionals. And PSI was kicked off in 2012 and taught over 253 North Korean students. PSI 2012 was held at Kunming University of Science and Technology, North Korea's first privately funded university. Here you can see our PSI faculty members who were part of the PSI 2012. Pro bono faculty members came from Germany, Australia, Qatar, Britain, Switzerland, and the United States. Here you can see one of our PSI faculty members, Justin Fisher, who is currently associated with GEO, Government Accountability Office, who is teaching sampling, who taught sampling to DPRK students. You might have noticed that there's a picture of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, former leaders of North Korea, the Southern Wall. There's a fair amount of literature about self-esteem measured by the RSCS scale, and I'd like to point out 3 primary papers listed among others. Aapor and Walter studied the RSCS by decomposing it into 2 subscales, self-confidence and self-liking. Self-confidence is defined as a sense of personal efficacy and power tied to people in individuals' countries, while self-liking is conceptualized as a sense of one's worth as a social object and associated with people mostly in collectivist countries. Aapor and Walter's hypothesis of a trade-off existing between self-liking and self-confidence is later supported by psychoanalytic study of the 3 countries. This is relevant to our research because DPRK is probably the most collectivist country, and we would like to examine the extent to which North Korea may share self-esteem traits with other collectivist countries. Virology and administered the cross-cultural study of comparing self-esteem of high school students from the United States, Czech Republic, China, and South Korea. Smith and Alec administered RSCS mostly to college students in 3 nations, thus becoming a prime source of comparing DPRK self-data. These 2 studies confirmed the cross-cultural merit of RSCS scale, including many in Asia. Therefore, we felt comfortable to test in DPRK. There are 4 research questions I would like to address, 2 of which I'll speak about today, since time restrains me from talking about the others. First, is it feasible to administer the RSCS in North Korea? The RSCS was chosen for our study for several reasons, and I'll talk about it briefly. But how reliable and valid is it for measuring the self-esteem of people in North Korea, a country that many consider a hungry kingdom? North Korea asserts self-reliance as a national philosophy of governance, and its citizens behave and manage life by self-reliance principles. Studying the self-esteem of North Korean people will help us understand its relevance to attitude and behavior in the nation of self-reliance. We attempt to understand the core of the North Korean people's attitude and behavior by investigating their self-esteem, or one of the fundamental drivers of human behavior. Secondly, we aim to answer the following research question. To what extent is North Korean people's self-esteem similar to or different from the self-esteem of people in other countries? How does self-esteem in North Korea compare to self-esteem in individualist countries and collectivist countries? We want to compare the self-esteem score as well as the level of variation between participants' response. I will now move on to explain the methodology used in our study. But before I do, I would like to give you a definition of self-esteem. Maurice Rosenberg, the creator of Rosenberg self-esteem scale, defines self-esteem as overall positive or negative evaluation of one's worth. As such, self-esteem drives one's attitude and behavior as much as it is molded by social factors. This is why it is fascinating to study self-esteem. We have used the RSCS for this survey because it is the most widely used measure of self-esteem in social science research. It has been used for about 50 years since 1965 in many studies and has proven to be highly reliable. Moreover, it is easy to administer and score, which is essential in a secluded nation like DPRK. When it was administered across many countries, it has shown to be reliable in various cultures and languages. The RSCS scale is a 10 also coded a 4-point scale ranging from 1, strongly agree, to 4, strongly disagree. The scale is composed of an equal number of positively and negatively worded items to prevent response biases. Here are some BPRK students filling out the survey for the first time in their life. We hasten to point out some research limitations that should be taken into account when interpreting the findings. The first limitation being feasibility. Back in 2012, the student pool only consisted of males and elite students. As of today, the university has turned co-ed. The second limitation was the English proficiency of the students that might have caused misunderstandings and misinterpretations. Lastly, the exclusion of sensitive question was unavoidable due to its intervening circumstances. The questionnaire could not include any political or religious questions. Despite these constraints, we believe the solutions could give good indication and be a basis for future studies. Generally, positive self-evaluations are universal. Western cultures and individualist nations are more towards the higher ends of self-evaluations. It may not be necessarily so in Eastern culture and collectivist nations. Thus, our discussion is devoted to 4 points. First, cross-cultural comparison. Comparison across cultures may reveal the extent to which individualist and collectivist cultures affect the way that people self-evaluate themselves. Second, we will extend the cultural comparison by reviewing coefficient of variation of DPRK self-esteem in comparison to 53 other nations. Third, we will compare self-liking and self-confidence of young adults in DPRK with those peers in 53 other countries. Lastly, we will examine whether there is any cultural difference associated with positively or negatively worded items of the RCS scale. That is, we will discuss whether there is any cultural bias associated with the wordings of the RCS. This data map shows average scores of the RCS in 53 countries. The quartiles correspond to colors, and the darker colors represent the higher RCS scores. In general, Europe and the Americas are known to have more individualist cultures, and in contrast to those countries of Africa and Asia. Respectively, Europe and the Americas have been found to have higher RCS scores than Africa and Asia. Our research indicated that all countries scored above the theoretical midpoint of the scale, and that positive self-evaluation is general. In comparison to people in Europe and the US, the RCS score of the DPRK, highlighted in pale yellow, is fairly low. We will see in a second where DPRK self-esteem stands among the pack. The next visualization is about the coefficient of variation of DPRK self-esteem in comparison to those of 53 countries. Let me give you a brief